Cinema lenses used to be something us filmmakers only dreamed of. They were things that we seen on those big productions and cost more than the average person's car. Well, luckily for us, things have changed. Budget cinema lenses are here and they're getting pretty amazing. Today, we're going to take a look at the new Laowa range of Cine Zooms. We'll compare their amazing size, look at the image quality, and find out why they may be the best ones on sale today. As filmmakers, we are getting pretty spoilt with cinema lenses. It does feel like we have an ever-growing amount to choose between in today's market. So then, why would Laowa choose to release their new Ranger Super 35mm cinema zooms right now? Well, as someone who only owns full-frame cameras, this may sound a little strange, but these are my new favourite zoom lenses. Let me explain. This simply has to do with all the cameras released, say, in the last 12 to 24 months, all follow a pattern and have something in common. Let's take my own three cameras for example. The Panasonic Lumix S5 II, the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K full frame, and finally the Sony Bravano. All are different manufacturers and all are different price points, yet share one important factor in common. And this all has something to do with shooting in the Super 35 modes. We're going to dig much deeper into this in just 1 second, but right before that, recently I noticed that over 90% of my viewers are not subscribed to the channel. I am trying desperately to change this, so if you can just hit that subscribe button, in return I can make you a promise to make the best possible content I can. Now let's dive into what these lenses can actually do. I always like to say with my videos that Laowa did send me this lens, but they don't get any input in the creation of this video. I don't get to keep the lens, and they get to see it at the same time as you do. You may have heard of the Laowa Rangers before. That's because they do have a full frame version of these cinema lenses. So what do the new compact Rangers have to offer what is different? The one I have in here for review is the 17 to 50mm. This is the middle lens of a 3-lens kit. On the wide end, we have an 11 to 18mm, and on the far end, we have a 50 to 135mm. They cover Super 35mm sensors, so if you was to roughly work out their full frame equivalents, this would be around 16 to 200mm for the full kit. The 17 to 50mm I have is roughly in the realms of a 24 to 70 full frame equivalent. The full kit has a constant aperture of t2.9 across all three lenses. Now this is really important that it is a T and not an f-stop like we see in photography lenses. This is a massive oversimplification, but basically the measurement of an f-stop is the gap between the aperture blades, where the measurement of a t-stop is the light transmitted through the actual lens. This translates to the same amount of light hitting the sensor at the widest millimeter as the furthest millimeter. Unlike some photography lenses, even though they have a constant aperture f-stop, as you zoom in, the image may get slightly darker. Something that is super nice to start off with is whether you order the 3-lens kit or just one lens by itself, you still get a nice hard case. Normally, when you're buying budget cinema lenses, if you buy a single lens by itself, it just comes in a box, where if you buy the kit, it would come in a nice hard case. It gets even better from there as the case is made extremely well. On the outside, you have those double locking levers, and on the inside, the foam is really well made and it's not some of that cheap stuff that will start flaking away. Moving on to the lens itself, it is incredibly small. I don't think the images and videos online do this thing much justice. I have the PL Matte version here, which is a fully metal construction and balances really well. And that said, this is the biggest lens out of all three in the kit. The size and the weight of the lens just feels right when you pick it up. It does not feel overly dense and too heavy, and it also does not feel that light that it feels cheap. And while we are on the subject of weight, this is actually quite interesting, as they come in two different versions. There is a standard version and a light version. The standard version that I have here, I think balances and feels really good, but if you needed to shave off a bit of extra weight, say you was running on a drone or for smaller gimbals, then there is an option. Depending on which one of the 3 lenses you are talking about, it takes them from around 800 to 850 grams down to 600 and 650 grams. What I will say though is this comes at an extra cost of $500. So I would only choose this option if you are really going to need it. The lenses do come in all the mirrorless mounts that you could ever need or want, but for me, I personally would get the PL mount and just adapt, as if you change camera systems, you can then take the lenses with you. So what are they like to actually use? Being so small and compact, they are pretty much good to go on any camera. Something that I've seen in the past is like people using big Cine zooms on really small bodies, and it looks a bit weird and they're almost unusable unless they're mounted on a tripod with support. These lenses are the total opposite of that. Coming in at roughly the same size and weight of a Sigma 24-70 photography lens, you can run these on anything from a mirrorless camera to a small cinema camera to even the biggest like Arri Alexa or my Sony Bravia here is a really good balance. The biggest mistake people are going to make with these lenses is writing them off for full frame cameras. As I mentioned before, using those super 35mm modes inside of all the latest cameras has massive benefits. Using the 6K full frame Blackmagic sensor is the perfect example. Cropping into its super 35 mode uses pixel for pixel, so you are not getting any weird or loss in quality, and because the sensor is 6K you are getting a full 4K readout. You then have less rolling shutter, higher frame rates. Using compact zoom lens like this on such a small capable camera really brings the camera to life. I can see the compact Ranger zooms being such an underrated good pair for the new Blackmagic Pixus camera, as that uses this 6K full frame sensor and it's going to have all the same super 35 modes, and with the better body design and this super compact lens, that will be such an underrated setup. My second favourite feature of these lenses after the compact size is they are parfocal. This basically means, for those who don't know, that as you use the zoom range, the lens remains in focus. There is 2 massive benefits to this, and the first one is it allows you to be much faster in run and gun scenarios. Let's say you capture sports content or weddings, anything that has to be captured in the moment. You could have a player running down the court to do a slam dunk on the wide end before punching in to the far zoom to capture them celebrating, and all this is done without touching the focus one bit. These lenses have a minimum focus distance of 0.35 inches. This is pretty impressive. It's not quite macro good, but it's not too far off. And as you'd expect with a Cine lens, the iris and zoom and focus are all incredibly smooth when using them. Something I didn't expect is when we were doing those in-camera zooms on this lens, it was noticeably smoother than my DZO Picto zooms. And speaking of those DZO zooms, I own those lenses for 2 years and I absolutely love them. But thinking in comparison to the Ranger zooms, it's getting really difficult to think of a reason why you would pick those over these lenses. In terms of price and image, both lenses are incredibly good value for money. But with the Rangers coming in at half the size, they just balance so much better on all these new cameras what seem to just be getting smaller and smaller. To the fun stuff, what is the image quality like? Well, it ticks a lot of boxes. You can tell that they have created these Ranger zooms with versatility in mind, which I think is a really smart move. Because the type of people in this price point which will own and operate the lenses will be working across a vast different range of projects. The main thing with the image out of the Ranger zooms is that they do feel like cinema lenses. Don't get me wrong, I love a G Master lens or a Lumix S Pro lens, but they are photography lenses first, and sometimes they do feel that way. Mirrorless lenses are always super sharp and super clean, where the Ranger zooms have a bit more smoothness to the fall off of the depth, and the highlights just roll off a bit softer, which will always lead to a more cinematic image. It can vary from frame to frame, and I guess it is all about the storytelling. But in my opinion, I always say that f2.8 is the perfect aperture for capturing cinematic images. Anything more can feel a little too distracting, and anything less can start to feel a bit video-y and digital. So I think these lenses at T2.9 really do have the sweet spot. Looking at the sharpness chart here, you can tell that these are not the sharpest lenses in the world, but that is definitely purposeful. There is a little bit of chromatic aberration when you crop in massive lead, but this, again, can often look really nice and is something that happens on really high-end budget cinema lenses. The colours render really natural and even across the board, and as with all these good new budget cinema lenses, we have minimal focus breathing and very minimal vignetting. There is a bit of distortion at the widest point on this lens, but nothing crazy, and again, it's quite characteristic and looks pretty good to me. These lenses do flare and there is quite a lot of elements to them, but for me, I would prefer this over say like a mirrorless lens that just does not flare at all. I'm sure there's people out there who don't want any flaring, and this is really common in photography. But for me, when you are storytelling and creating cinematic images, you can almost use flares as character and motivation in your frames. Overall, I'm super impressed with these new compact Ranger zooms. I cannot find many negatives other than I got one lens in for review, so I can't test consistency across the kit, and I feel like they are a massive step in the right direction for budget cinema lenses. If you are after a small compact zoom lens for creating videos, then you cannot go wrong with the Ranger zooms. And if you want to see me using this lens on a project, watch this video here.